Okay, thank you again. Thank you so much. And this is an honor for me to be here speaking with you. So as we had a couple of, I think, two lectures before this on Buddhism and Islam. And this will be the third part. And I think you have already got familiar with certain kind of encounter of Islam and Buddhism. Today, I will continue the discussion from a different angle, which will be focused on geography that I come from Afghanistan and Central Asia, and I will discuss how Buddhism has influenced Persian culture, and also you can see the traces of Buddhism in names of the cities in Afghanistan and also historical figures. But before I start discussing that, so before going to the discussion, I would like to clarify a couple of concepts here. I think this was also discussed in the previous lectures, but it's good to go through them again. So usually when we hear the word Islam, we usually think about, like, what comes to our mind is doctrine, theology, and practice. So it's Islam as a religion. So in this discussion today, that's not what we are going to discuss, or that's not what I'm going to talk about. So it will not be just Islam as a religion and theology, law and practice, but I will be talking more what the term that is called Islamicate. So the concept of Islamicate, first introduced by Hodson, denotes the cultural, artistic, and intellectual expression that emerge within Islamic societies or under Islamic influence, regardless of their religious affiliation or their creators. Thus, it refers more broadly to the sphere of Islamic civilization rather than solely to Islam as a system of faith and practice. So, in this way, this is more of a Islamic civilization, not just not Islam as a religion. And then also, when we talk about Persian, so what comes to our mind or our understanding of Persian is that Persian is a language, it's a nationality, and it's ethnicity. But in this discussion, when I use the term Persian, I refer to language, not ethnicity and nationality. But then the better term will be the Persianate. So Persianate is the culture that was produced in regions where the Persian language was the language, the administration language, and the elite language. For instance, in India in medieval time, where Persian was the language of the administration and elites, but it was not a native language. So those are the two distinctions. So with that in mind, we can go further. So my talk will be basically in two sections. The first section will be I will be discussing about geography. So this is the geography that where Islam and Buddhism has encountered each other and they had interacted. But then this geography is not really known, and also it's become a lot like misunderstood and also misplaced. So I will talk about this geography, the history of it, and cultural background of it, and then in the second part, I will discuss about certain terms, like for example, names of the cities, historical figures, and also I will show the trace of Buddhism in Persian literature and how it is influenced Persian literature and still continues on. So I will try to talk about 45 minutes to 60 minutes. Maybe the first part I will discuss about around 20 minutes to 30 minutes, and then the second part about 30 minutes and 40 minutes. But let's see how it goes. Yeah, so when we study history and culture within academia, we often encounter categorization like Islamic studies, Indic studies, Buddhist studies, and so on. Sometimes these divisions are also framed as geography as European studies, Middle Eastern studies, and or South Asian studies. Yet, there is a region that does not fit neatly into any of these categories. It remains vague, abstract, and even challenging to name. In my research that I have done on this region, history of this region, I have collected 12 different names that scholars have used for this relatively small place. So, why is this a problem? The problem is that um, this place has been um, when we have this much of names for a small place, it also shows a problem of a lack of good understanding of this place. So, and then why is this also important? It's important because when we discuss about Buddhism and Islam, this is the area where Buddhism and Islam they encountered each other and they influence each other. But yet this geography is really confusing when we want to understand it, and I will show it to you like how this is confusing. So, um, for example, when we discuss this region, sometimes the names are given to them like as Arabic, Islamic, Central Asia, Inner Asia, which they're all true, but at the same time, it brings some kind of it doesn't give us a good grasp of like which geography we are talking about. For example, when we say Arabic, the reader's mind goes to like the Arabic world, so it's like the West Asia. But then when we say Islamic, Islamic is so broad also. It's like from Indonesia all the way to Morocco. So Central Asia, Inner Asia, they're closer, but at the same time, it's like it can be like, for example, Mongolia is also Central Asia. Sometimes Tibet is also part of Central Asia. So it's not very clear. So that's why I unpack this problem, and then after that, in the second session of the talk, I will explain more about the Buddhism influence in this region. So the 12 names that I have gathered for this region is Central Asia, Greater Central Asia, Eastern Iran, Eastern Muslim. Just imagine, I don't know what does Eastern Muslim mean. Like, like he's a Muslim, but he's from Eastern. So, but also like a Malaysian is also is Eastern. Eastern Islamic, again, Greater Khorasan, Greater Gandhara, Aryana, Greater Iran, Persianate, Central Asian, Turkestan, Western Turkestan. This is all names that have been used for just one region that we are going to discuss today and study it. Yet the region has played a unique role in making of culture and civilization. Geographically, it lies between West Asia and East Asia. Um, South Asia and Eurasia, a true crossroad of worlds, it has served as a meeting point of cultures and civilization throughout history, resulting in an extraordinarily diverse and rich cultural heritage. That Buddhism is also part of that. So, yet, despite its importance, this region has not been well understood. Too often, it has been reduced to something smaller than what it really is, described as merely as Iranian, Indic, Arabic, or simply part of Silk Road. So, but yet, some scholars have realized this problem, and they have studied this region, and they have tried to conceptualize this region with a different name. So, for example, Frederick Starr, he is a scholar of this region, and he in his book, The Lost Enlightenment: Central Asia's Golden Age from the Arab Conquest to the Tamerlane, highlights how this region between roughly 800 and 1200 AD achieved astonishing advancement in science, philosophy, literature, mathematics, and medicine. It was home to some of the greatest minds of the medieval world, thinkers whose ideas not only transformed Islamic civilization, but also it paved the way for what is called now what we have, the Western civilization. So people like Starr, they have which they have they studied this place more detailed, and they have realized that this region is very complex. It's very diverse. The words like, for example, Arabic or Iranian, they are good concepts and they are good terms, but at the same time, it does not catch. It does not represent this region very well. And then the other person is Christopher Beckwith, which Professor Daniel also mentioned him a lot in the last two lectures. What he has done is that in addition to Starr's work, he has actually, so what Starr has done is Starr has showed that how there was a time between 800 to 1200, these 400 years, and enlightenment happened in this region, which actually paved the road for modern science and civilization, Western science and civilization. But what Beckwith has done is that Beckwith has showed that how some of this and many of this science in Central Asia comes actually from the Buddhist viharas, Buddhist universities of this region. So um, this is the uh, as mentioned, Starr. He's a scholar of the region, so he has conceptualized the term, which he calls it the Greater Central Asia. And this is the region that he has mapped out. So I'll just give a couple of seconds so that you can look at this map and then familiarize yourself, because we will be discussing some of these names later on. These names will appear. So this region starts from the southern of Kazakhstan and goes all the way to north of Pakistan, Kashmir, Afghanistan, east of Iran, and then you have the Central Asian countries, which is Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, and then important cities like Bukhara, Samarkand, Bagram, Kabul, Ghazni, Herat, Tus, Taxila. These are the important cities of this region, which he calls it the Greater Central Asia. So the background of this region, we know Rig Veda. We know that there are four Vedas, and the oldest one is the Rig Veda. So Rig Veda was actually composed in what is now current Afghanistan and Pakistan. It was composed in Gandhara. And then what we have also is Avesta. Avesta is the sacred text of Zoroastrians. And but at the same time, we have a language that is being designated as Avestan language. So Avesta was also composed in the current region of Afghanistan. And then Rig Veda is older than Avesta, but then they are very close to each other in terms of beliefs. Rig Veda later on, we know that the Vedas, they have the four parts, starts with Samhita and then it ends up with the Upanishad. So then the Upanishad becomes the speculative and philosophical part of the Vedas, which the Upanishad comes, and then we see that as a background of Buddhism. And then in the people who remained in Afghanistan, which they had similar belief as the Vedic religion, it slowly developed another religion which became Zoroastrianism, which is a kind of a monistic religion, but it's not really absolute monotheistic religion, and it's a dualistic. There is the absolute evil and absolute good in the world. So then the region becomes part of the Achaemenid Empire. So 550 to 330 BC, this region of Greater Central Asia, Afghanistan and Gandhara, becomes part of the Achaemenid Empire. And then in the Achaemenid Empire, it's very important to mention a few things. Is that when the Achaemenid Empire comes and takes over this region, if you know about Achaemenid Empire, they were stretching all the way to Greece. So from Greece to Gandhara, to Taxila, this becomes under one empire. So, and then this brings connection, and the connection of the people, and it breaks trade. So in this time, we have some kind of a globalization happening. And then it is in this context that we see Panini, that many of you, I know that you study Sanskrit, but many of you might not know that Panini was actually from Taxila. He's like he was from Charsada, actually, from a region now border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. So it is in this globalization that that happens. We see that Panini so-called purifies the language, because we know that in the Vedic religion we have two types of, or in Hinduism in general, we have two types of revelation. We have the Shruti and we have the Smriti. So the Shruti is the revealed. So language is sacred. So that's why it had to be purified. That's it all happens in this context of the cultural change that happens in the region. And then from then we see that with Panini, uh, um, um, basically systematize the Sanskrit language, it transforms the whole South Asian culture. And then after that, Buddhism arrives in the region. So Buddhism arrives around 300 BC in the region. And then usually you hear this, that there is like this interaction between the Greek thought and the Indian thought, the Greek thought and the Indian thought. And again, this is kind of like misplaced. It's like, okay, it happened in India, but where actually, which part of India it really happened? So, but actually, if you look at it, this interaction of Buddhism and Greek thought, it actually happened in current Afghanistan, Central Asia, and Gandhara, or in the greater Central Asia. So, for example, we are all familiar with King Maninder, the Melinda Pana, the question of Melinda, which is a Buddhist discourse and treatise in Pali about the theory of the self. This actually happened in Gandhara. Uh, and then also something that we can reflect on is like, because that region was Zoroastrian and Avesta religion was there when Buddhism arrived, we see the interaction of the Greek thought and Buddhism. But how about the interaction of Avesta and Buddhism? This is something that scholars, so we can ask and research and try to figure it out. Because in last spring, I attended an online conference. There was a presenter. She had worked on Gandhara art, and her research was detailed about like these Gandhara statues. They are beautiful, and then they stand under their feet. There is something um, which is with a pedestal. So, and then in the pedestal, there is a lot of things going on. There is this like a kind of a theater going on. Like you see yeah, pictures of people, like for example, coming to giving offerings to the Buddha and doing rituals and things like that. In one of them, it was quite interesting that these lay people, they were coming and giving the offer, and then in the middle there was a fire altar. This was like very interesting. And in Zoroastrianism, fire is very important. The altar of fire is, it's the manifestation of the Ahura Mazda, which the Zoroastrians they worship. So like possible that's a connection of Zoroastrianism and Buddhism, but that's something that needs to be researched. But this is kind of a background of the region. And then also we know that Buddhism emerged in Magadha, and slowly it expanded. So it went south and uh, west and east, but then also it went north. So we know that it went to what is now Pakistan, Afghanistan, and went to Central Asia, and then from there it went to China. But again, our understanding most of the time has become like this, that we see this region as kind of like a passive, that okay, it was just a bridge that Buddhism went there and then passed by. So it was like just a receiver, but that's not the reality. That region actually transformed Buddhism in many ways, and then and Buddhism really thrived there. So like for example, people like Vasubandhu Asanga, you're familiar with them. They were born in Taxila, sorry, in Peshawar, in Gandhara, and then also schools of Sarvastivada, really nurtured in Afghanistan and Gandhara, and also the one of the old schools, Mahasamgika, also really thrive that, and also an offshoot of a branch of Mahasamgika, which is the Lokataravada, also was really thriving in Afghanistan. So, and then of course the Gandhara art. We know that the history of the Buddhism, the first period of the Buddhism, when Buddhism was an iconic religion, but then later on it became an iconic religion, and then this transform happened. And you know this debate of like, where did this happen first time? This transformation, did it happen in Mathura, or did it happen in Gandhara? Of course, there is this debate, but the goal here is not to settle this debate, but either Mathura or Gandhara, either one. What is important is that Gandhara played a major role in shaping Buddhism by creating these Buddha statues. So that was kind of like the background of the pre-Islamic background of the region, which I gave a brief introduction. Sorry, I just had a timer for myself. So, and then now we come to 7th century, when Islam emerged in what is Saudi Arabia, and then it slowly expanded, and you see that it also went east and west, and then towards east it went to Iran, and then it reached Afghanistan. So around 8th century, Islam arrived in what is now current Afghanistan. But by then, Buddhism had already existed for over 1,000 years. So this is the geography where Buddhism and Islam meets. So this leads us to the coexistence of Buddhism and Islam in the region. For example, the Chinese pilgrim Xuanzang, I hope I pronounce it correctly, would travel through this region just decades before the Muslim conquest, took meticulous notes, and recorded an extensive Buddhist presence in several areas. According to his account, Bamiyan in Afghanistan had approximately 10,000 monks. So you see, this is just right before the arrival of Islam. We see a strong presence of Buddhism in Bamiyan in Afghanistan. And then also we know that Muslims could not conquer parts of Afghanistan until the end of 9th century, during the rise of the Safavid dynasty, which is a local dynasty. So this is also another point, that Islam did not, that region did not become Muslim in just one day. It took about three centuries. And then Bamiyan continued as functioning site of Buddhism into 11th century. So again, so this means that Buddhism and Islam coexisted in Afghanistan and Central Asia for about 300 years. So what happens is that now, because Islam came, we have the emergence of a new culture in the region. The region, in the course of 2 to 3 centuries, slowly became Muslim. Bactrian, Sogdian, Gandhari, and Pahlavi language slowly fade away. Arabic becomes the new language of science. New court and elite language emerges in Central Asia. While a new culture formed, Buddhism existed in the region and slowly fade away. This is where and when we see the transition of Buddhism into the new culture. So now we see the arrival of, or the emergence of, Persian language. Persian language was born in the 9th century, third of the Islamic calendar, 9th century in Khorasan and Transoxiana. It was based on Middle Persian and Dari, but enriched by Arabic vocabulary of a strong religious orientation. During this formative period, the influence of Sufism was very strong, and so, in a sense, it was much easier for Sufism to leave its imprints on Persian literature, literary culture, and language than Arabic, which had also highly developed prosody and poetic tradition. So again, this region you already know, like Khorasan and Transiana. Basically, this is part of the greater Central Asia, part of Afghanistan, and also current Uzbekistan and that region. So this is where the Persian language emerged. Why is this important? It's important because this area had a strong Buddhist presence. So summary of the first section, we saw the geographical context, understanding the region's location and its significance within greater Central Asia. Historical and cultural background, we saw like how from the Rig Veda to Avesta and then the Greek culture and then Buddhism all met here, and this region became like kind of a melting pot. And then the Buddhist heritage, we also saw like how Buddhism had existed there for over 1,000 years in this region, and the intersection of Buddhism and Islam. So situating the region as a space where these two major traditions intersected, coexisted, and influenced one another. So now I go to the second part of my presentation, which is the emergence of a new culture, and I'll show like how in this new culture and new language we see the traces of Buddhism in it. So something very significant about the region politically and culturally that happened is the Samanid dynasty. So Samanid dynasty was one of the first Muslim states built by the native people of Central Asia who were Persian speakers. So in the 9th century, after the Arabs conquered this region, about over 100 years, Samanid dynasty was established in what is now Uzbekistan, in Bukhara. Their capital was Bukhara. So, and this becomes a turning point in the history of the region. I'll show you later a bit more. So the Samanid state played a pivotal role in promoting the Persian language. That's why it was very important culturally, marking a major turning point in the region's cultural and historical development. And then their role, there was a continuous revival of pre-Islamic Persian traditions and heritage. And then also in Samanid dynasty, they were fostering and supporting cultural identity, and also, if you know, works of Shahnama, which is the Persian epic, the composition of that, or actually recording of that, happened in the Samanid time, and it continued in the Ghaznavid time. So people also, like, for example, like Daqiqi, Balhami, and Firdausi, they were patronized by the Samanid dynasty. But now I will go to see the connection of it with Buddhism. The founder of the Samanid empire dynasty was a man called Saman Khuda. He was living in the 9th century. We don't have an exact record of when he was born and when did he die, but he lived in 8th century. 8th century, and he was a contemporary of the Barmakids. I think you heard Professor Daniel mention about Barmakid previously. And then, what is important in this discussion that we have today is that we want to find the etymology of Saman. So this is from Dud, a scholar of Buddhism, history of Buddhism. In the early days of Buddhism, during the time of the Buddha, there were only 61 Arhat living. According to the Theravada canon, the followers of the Buddhas were known as Sakyaputiya Samanas. So we see here in the early Buddhism, like all the way going back to the time of the Buddha, the term Saman or Samanas being used for the Buddhists. or follower of the Buddha. And then also in Dhammapada 142, we see here, which you can read the whole thing, but in the last section you see so brahmano, so samano, sa bhikkhu. So he indeed is a brahmana, samana, and a bhikkhu. Again, we see in Dhammapada the record of samana in connection to the Buddhists and follower of the Buddha. And then in Sanskrit, the samanas become shramana, which you are familiar with it. And then also in Gandhari language, which was the language of the region, it has become shamana, which is quite interesting. Later on, we will see that in Persian, both of them are used. Saman and shaman, both of them are used referring to Buddhists. So Central Asian Buddhists were called saman, shaman. We will see this in the Persian literature in a bit. So the word saman khuda is highly connected with saman. So how is this important and relevant today? First, it's historically significant that the name of a major Islamic dynasty may have had a connection to Buddhist origins. Okay. And then what the relevance of it to today in our time is that Tajikistan nationalist historiographers trace the history of Tajikistan's nation state to the Samanids in the 9th century. In other words, the Samanid kings are seen as the national fathers and founders of Tajikistan state. And here is Tajikistan currency. This in the left, you see the picture of a king. He is Ismail Samani, is the founder, known as the founder of the Samanid dynasty. And then you see in the other one, it says 100 Samani. So even the currency of Tajikistan is named after that dynasty. And if this is connected with Buddhism, we have a direct connection of Buddhist term in Islamic Muslim country currency. So now I go to another name, which is Samangan. It's a province in the north of Afghanistan. So in the right, you see this is a monastery. It's a vihara, which exists in Samangan. It is carved in the stone. It's amazing. It has 5 chambers and a hall. It's like from 3rd and 4th century AD. So now we discuss the etymology of Samangan. The Afghan scholars, they have theorized the etymology of Samangan. They have come up with these etymologies that it comes from Sam Samuj, which means cave. So Samuj, Sam, cave, stone. It's a good theory, respectfully. It's good theory. But then if we split the word in 2 parts, we get Saman Gan from Samanagama, Buddhist village. And why this theory is more valid or makes more sense is because we have the Buddhist monastery here. So it makes perfect sense that it should be Samanagama or Shramanagrama, the Buddhist village. So the stupa and Buddhist monastery built in the 3rd and 4th century. Then I come to etymology of another city is Bukhara, which was the capital of the Samanid dynasty we mentioned earlier. It flourished as a place of learning and science and attracted scholars such as Avicenna. So Avicenna was actually studying there. So the etymology of the name, where does it come from? Most probably it comes from Vihara, which means monastery, because in Persian we have the record of words as Bahara and Bahar. So in Persian, vihara has turned to bahara and then to bahar, which actually is again connected to vihara. Just like, for example, the famous university in Balkh, which was called Nava Vihara, now it's called Naubahar. So in the contemporary Persian, it means new spring. Bahar also means spring in the contemporary Persian. So it really doesn't make sense. Like new spring, spring is already new, so why new spring? But the etymology is Nava Vihara, so now Bahar. And then we also have a Bihar, a state in India. So if we put them all together, it's highly possible that the etymology of Bukhara is rooted with Bihara monastery. And by the way, I'm I I I am from Balkh, so I was born there, and that's my hometown. Um, and then another one. This is a place in near Kabul. It's in Parwan province. You see the Buddhist monastery, the Buddhist stupa there. And this area, it's a district. It's called Tupdara. It's called Tupdara. In contemporary language, Tup means ball, something round. Dara means valley, so a round or bald valley. But if you pay attention to it, uh, it should be Stopadara, valley of the Stopa. And then Farhar, this is a here in the right side, you can see the map of Afghanistan, and then there is this red place. This is where Farhar is located. And then also, Farhar is a name of place in Afghanistan and also Tajikistan. And and Tajikistan is just the other side of the border. So it's the same region that in ancient time it was called Khotal. And we have Farhar in Afghanistan and also Tajikistan, but that's the same region. So uh, Farhar, located in present-day Afghanistan and Tajikistan, once was a thriving center of Buddhism. The renowned Adina Tapa site operated here during this period when Hyo Chao, uh, I hope I pronounced it correctly, visited the region in the 726 CE. He recorded that hundreds of viharas or Buddhist monasteries were active at that time. So you see that in 8th century, which already Islam had arrived in this region, this I think Korean monk comes and visits this region, and he records that there are like hundreds of viharas functioning at that time. So that's the background. And then Atina Tepe is also very important monastery. Actually, if you read the work of Beckwith, he puts his argument based on Russian scholars like Bartold and other people who actually did archaeological work in this Adina Tapa. And this is where they have actually, the archaeologists, they have actually found the resemblance of the earliest Islamic madrasas and their connection with the Buddhist vihara. So um, this is a quote from Al-Biruni, and Al-Biruni was a great scholar who was born in Karaman, Uzbekistan, and he spent most of his scholarly time in Afghanistan. He says that the people of Khorasan called them as shamans. You see, he's talking about Buddhists. You see again here the word shaman is used. Their monuments, the Bahars, you see now the Vihara has turned to Bahar, of their idols and their farkhars can still be seen along the borders of Khorasan near India. So here we see Bahar and also Farkhar refer to Buddhists of the region. So again, we see that this etymology of the etymology of this place is rooted to Buddhism. Sorry, I'll just look at time. Now I will we dive to some poetry. So here is a poem from Rodeki. He says, فرخار بزرگ و نیک جایی است کان موضوع آن but nawais. Farhar is a great and noble place where that sweet-voiced idol dwells there. So Rodeki is, you see, is living between 9th and 10th century. He was a court poet of the Samanid dynasty. So he is writing a poem about Farhar, which at this time it's still a Buddhist region. And he says that where that sweet-voiced idols dwells there. And also interestingly, in Persian language, the term for idol is Bud, and it literally comes from Bud and Buddha. So, and then in the next poems that I show, everywhere when the English translation says idol, remember that the original word is Bud, what actually literally means Buddha. So this is also from Rudeki. He says بت پرستی گرفته ایم همه این جهان چون بت است و ما شمنیم. We have all become idol worshippers now, for this world is an idol, and we are we are its shamans. You see again, he's using the word shaman, and this is a very interesting poem. It says بت من جانور آمد و شمنش بی دل و جان منم او را شمن و خانه من فرخار است. So it says, my idol came as living creature. Her shaman stands soulless in her grave. I am her shaman in love's sweet stare, and Farhar is the home I share. So beautiful poetry. It's like we don't have time to to go through it line by line. I really love this poem, but it's like, in other words, the Buddha statue came as a living being with soul, but I, her shaman, yes, the poet you hear, I stand soulless. She breathes, I do not. She shines, I am her shadow. I worship her, for in worship I hope to be reborn, to find soul, to find life, and Farhar is my home. And then here we see that how the term but is used in a autumn melancholy, like the poet is describing how autumn comes and destroys the nature and takes away happiness, and then he makes a very interesting allegory with his happy times and now that the autumn has come. So I will not read the whole poem, but I will just read the last part. که من بر روی نگارین آن بت فرخار خزان در آمد و آن برگا بکند و برخت درخت از این غم چون من نژند گشت و نزار. So he says, if autumn weren't a messenger of parting, why would it tear 1,000 lovers from their dreams? The tree once glowed with joy in its green dress, as I did. Here, you see, like he is making an allegory of like the trees when they were green and they were happy, and then his happy time, as I did gazing at the face of the Farhar idol or Farhar Buddha. And then here again, in praise of spring. This is also amazing poem. You will see that here the poet creates an imagination, a world that is full of Buddhism and Buddhist images. So he says that باغ بتخانه گشت و گلبن بود بادخواران گلپرست شمن هر درختی چنوش لبه صنم است بر زمین اندرون کشان دامن. So sorry, I cannot see all of it now. Okay, the garden has turned to a temple of idols, and the blossoms idols. So he's imagining the garden. The garden is like all idols, like temple of idols. It's like a vihara, monastery, whatever you call it, and the blossoms are the idols. were wine drinkers, worshippers of flowers as shamans. So just like the shamans worship the 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 statues, the wine drinkers they worship the flower. Each tree stands like a fair one, with lips sweet as the idol, with lips sweet as the idols, dragging her flowing skirt across the earth's line. So it's like you can see like this whole imagination is full of Buddhism. Um, sorry, we don't have much time to discuss, but uh, yeah, and here this is another example. Here you will see um, here the Buddha or the statue is described as an unkind lover. Says ای باد صبحدم خبر دلستان بگوی وصف جمال آن بت نامهربان بگوی بگذار مشک و بوی سر زلف او بیار یاد شکر مکن سخنی ز آن دهان بگوی. Says, O morning breeze, bring me news of beloved. Speak of the beauty of that cruel idol bride. Bring me the scent from her dark, musk-scented hair. Forget the sugar taste of her sweet lips, declare. You see, he's describing his unkind lover here as the Buddha. So this is from Sadi Shirazi. He's from 13th century. Shirazi was living in Shiraz in current Iran. Okay, this is another uh, a representation of Buddha or statue in Persian poetry. Here, this becomes the Buddha gets a very mystical interpretation. So you will see here that the poet speaks of the Buddha or the statue revealing her face. So this revealing of the face, it could be a revelation, it could be a glimpse of enlightenment, it could be an experience of non-duality, like whatever you call it. And it's used in that metaphor. And it goes like this. ای مطرب جان چودف به دست آمد این پرده بزن که یار مست آمد چون چهره نبود آن بت زیبا ماه از سوی چرخ بت پرست آمد. So it says, O minstrel of the soul, O musician of the soul, now that the daf is in your hand, daf is a traditional instrument, play that melody, for the beloved intoxicated has come. When the beautiful idol revealed her face, this is where he's making a metaphor, allegory of the idol revealing her face, which becomes a mystical experience. Even the moon came down and became worshipper of that idol. This poem is from Rumi. Rumi was born in the 13th century in 1207 in Balkh, Afghanistan, and died in Konya. So, and then here is, I have just two more poems and then I'll stop. So I know that time is running. Okay, I'm on time. So just, I think two more poems and then we can stop here. So this is from Hafiz. Hafiz is a 14th century Persian poet from Iran. He says, بتی دارم که گرد گل ز سنبل سایبان دارد بهار عارضش خطی به خون ارغوان دارد غبار خط بپوشانید خورشید رخش یارب بقای جاودانش ده که حسن جاودان دارد. Here you see, yeah, idol is described, used as a metaphor, as a beauty of the beloved, of the lover. He says, I have an idol whose roses-like face has a canopy of curls around it. The spring of her cheek has a line drawn in the blood of the redbud. O Lord, cover the dust of the line from the sun of her face. Grant her eternal life, for she possesses eternal beauty. And then we see how this concept of Buddha, an idol in Persian literature, has continued all the way to our time in 20th century. So the presence or the reemergence of the idol and shaman in modern poetry. This poem is from Iranian poet Muhammad Taqi Bahar. He was a neoclassicist poet. That means that he was using a lot of classic words in his poetry. And then in his poem, you see a lot of terms of shaman and also Bahar, which we saw it's connected with monastery and vihara. So it reemerges back in his poetry. Yeah, so I will just put the translation here. It says, your little lock of air became cunning and dark indeed. For that they will strike off its hate within me indeed. Since your stature chose the path of upright truth, I bow before it as a shaman before his idol in the shrine. So you see again here, Muhammad Taqi Bahar was a 20th century Iranian poet. He uses again the word of shaman um, and um, and both and he has a lot of other poems that um, he uses these words of shaman Bahar. And interestingly, even his last name, I'm not saying this absolutely that his last name is connected with that, but even his last name is Bahar. And as I mentioned, Bahar in Persian can mean spring, but at the same time, it's rooted to Bahara, Vihara. So possibly he must have chosen it. It's possible that he has chosen that purposefully. So uh, the summary, so I gave a background of the Greater Central Asia, its history. I kind of gave a glimpse of Buddhism in Central Asia, its interaction with the Islam and Buddhism in the 8th and 11th century. Then we talked about traces of Buddhism in places names evident in like Bukhara, Samangan, Farkhar, Topdara. And then I also showed how the idol of Farkhar, which we saw that Farkhar was a Buddhist place, a Buddhist region, it transited, transferred to classical Persian literature. Um, and then also we saw how this it it transferred to Persian literature really literally with connection of Buddhism with direct connection of like Saman, Shaman, and Buddhist places. But then later on, this concept evolved as a metaphor for the beauty of the beloved, and also even as a concept of a mystical experience that the poem we saw in Rumi's poem. Um, yeah, so in general, and also we saw how this cultural interconnectedness and how we see the traces of Buddhism in Afghanistan and the Persian culture. But overall, I think one thing in Buddhist philosophy is that phenomena are not independent, so they're dependent. So as the cultures, there is no such a thing as pure culture. That's all interdependent, and this is a fantastic example of it. So yeah, thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you. Very interesting traveling through space there and through time. I want to make two comments. I'm sure there will be some questions from the audience, but it's interesting, two things. It always is interesting how Buddhism started without representation of the Buddha, just like Islam doesn't have like having these representation, anthropomorphic representation. And then in that region, the word idol gets connected with Buddha. It's almost like a cosmic joke or something. So that's a one thing. The other thing I'm wondering is the word idol the right translation in Persian. I have no idea, but it's interesting because it has to do with beauty, with love, with the object of our love or our object of devotion. I don't know if you could say a few words about either of these two things.
No, I totally agree with you. I tried also looked at to see like other translation in English. You're absolutely right. That's why I made sure to say that whenever there is idol in the translation, it actually in the original language it's But, what actually originally comes from Buddha. So, but then in English, yeah, I absolutely agree with you. Idol is not a very not a very good term in for the Muslim audience in Islamic context, but even in the Western context, like idol has become like kind of like idol of your heart, like some kind of attachment or something. No, I absolutely agree with you. Yeah, I think there should be a different term for it because here we see Buddhist as you said, it's not. It's it's uh, it's very different. It's very positive.
What what is the meaning of Bod again to the Sufis? Could you just elaborate on that? How they incorporated that word? And is it derogatory or it seemed like it was about revelation, but I'm curious what Bod means to the Sufis.
Yes, that's a very good question. Thank you. I have to mention that when we talk about the Sufi literature, so we are talking about like a millennia, 1,000 years of literature. So yeah, in the Sufi literature, Buddha has many different meanings and also functions. So there are also derogatory images of Buddha used in Sufism. So, and that is like again with this kind of like both becoming the object of your worship, but also like the object of like it's also a representation of attachment. So, like if we have attachment to something, then in that sense, Buddha is used also as like a affliction and attachment to something. So it is always there is no one usage of the word Buddha in Sufism. Yeah, but then there are also these usages of Buddha as the mystical experience and yeah, so there are these different usages of the term of Buddha.
Okay, thank you.
I'll ask another question since I'm there. We've had conversation, you and I, about the influence between Sufism and Buddhism and the ascetics, particularly perhaps even the Siddha, because we're in the 8th century to the 13th century or 12th century, and this is a very strong period for the Siddha tradition and in the Buddhist tradition in that region, right? So I don't know if we can kind of even speculate about the connection.
Well, definitely, and also like when we talk about Sufism and in the Islamic world, we have two different type of like basically the Sufism has been divided in two parts. One is the Iraqi Sufism, and then the other one is the Khorasani Sufism. So, and the Khorasani Sufism emerged in what is now Afghanistan and Central Asia and Eastern Iran. So, and the background Khorasani Sufism was very different than the Iraqi Sufism. So actually, until not 10th century, the Sufis in Central Asia and Afghanistan, they will not call themselves Sufi. They would use this words like Zahid or Zuhd, which is like ascetic, and then later on, this Sufism became like a common term to use for the whole Sufi world. Definitely, there is that connection. Surprise, like even like in the poem I shared earlier, you see this kind of metaphors used in Sufi literature. For example, in the earlier poem that I shared, Rumi uses the term or the concept of moon. So he says that even the moon has come and become worshipper of the Buddha. So, and this is like, for example, one example of how like these concepts can be traced back to Buddhism, because we also have in this, if I correctly pronounce it, in Tanga, in the Tibetan Tanga, we have the 12 wheels, and then we have in one hand we have the Buddha standing out of the samsara, and then in the other we have the moon. So we see the like moon kind of like presenting this pure consciousness or Buddha nature. So, and then we see here in Rumi also using the concept of moon. So there are a lot of this kind of similarities that needs to be studied, like common metaphors that are used.
Thank you, Ershad, for wonderful presentation.
Thank you,
I
Sam.
was almost waiting for this kind of presentation, which suggested that there's so much common in India and Asia and different parts of this nation state. Beyond the boundary of nation state, we do have commonly shared things. Two questions come in my mind. One is a question, other is a comment. One is, at what stage did it happen that Islam became so intolerant that Buddhism gradually got vanished from there, or it was a natural transition? What could be the reason, or what is the reason being given in literature? And despite so much of influence of Sufism, why it could not really transform the relationship between Islam and Buddhism? Or there's one particular kind of relationship that has become very dominant. That's now visible when we saw that blast of Buddhist places. So that is one question. I'm always wondering, there's so much of common between Islam and Buddhism. Why there was contradiction? Was it contextual, contingent? Was it philosophical? Was it due to the influence of, say, emerging new kinds of production process? So these are the issues that one would like to explore. The other thing is that I think apart from this common culture, as you rightly said, that culture is never pure. Cultural boundaries are very fuzzy. I think there's another area which we need to probably explore, is the dialogue among knowledge systems. For instance, the medicine system. So much of dialogue in Asian societies on medicine system is there that one can actually look at the new Asian framework from there. So the tradition of dialogue and borrowing from each other, enriching each other, that has always been there. So maybe I'm not sure if we can separate culture and medicine system also, but there are so many entry points through which we can look at Asian societies, and we have different kind of pictures. One from the nation state point of view, where we see nation states are fighting and this is a conflict zone, almost emerging as conflict zone. Second, as you said, cultural sharing, where so much of influence on each other. And then on the medicine system, where, or the knowledge system, where you see so much of exchange of knowledge, not only sharing of knowledge, but also exchange and enriching each other. So these are the things that I have in mind. So first was the question, and second one you can consider at some stage looking at the knowledge systems.
Yes, thank you so much, sir. Thank you for coming. For audience that I don't know, Sir Manindra is a professor in JNU. Well, the question, I think it's a quite difficult question and complicated. Like how did Buddhism vanished from that region? Like why did it vanish? Um, I think there can be couple of reasons. One is the military campaigns, but that's something that is being, usually talked about that as if like this was the only reason behind it. But that happened actually in the 10th century, like not in the 7th century or 8th century. When the Arabs came to region of Afghanistan, we see that the Buddhism existed till 10th and 11th century. So they didn't wipe out the Buddhists from that region. It continued. But I think what happened is that the new religion, they got state support. The new religion got state support. And also what happened is that Buddhism kind of got squished from two sides. And that also we forget the other side. Because by 10th and 11th century, Buddhism was also in decline in India before the arrival of Islam. So Buddhism had kind of lost its roots in India, and also from the west side, the Arabs and Islam came, and they came kind of became sandwiched between two, and then they lost this basically this connection and network with the rest of the Buddhist world. So I think this really is the main reason that it really dried out. They became isolated in that region, and then they had to basically convert or leave. I think that's one of the main reasons. If Buddhism would have been still very strong in India by the time of like in the 9th century, 10th century, then they could have, for example, recruited in India. So they didn't have any place to go. I think that's a very a big factor. With the knowledge system, yeah, I totally agree with you because there is this strong connection. Like for example, we have evidences of how, like for example, in 7th century, uh, certain, for example, medical knowledge actually went from Balkh to Tibet, and then also we have evidences of Indian doctors and medicine scholars working in current Afghanistan. They had the presence, and also even with the Burma kids when they were the Buddhists from Afghanistan, when they went and became the Fazis in Baghdad, they actually brought with them the Indian medical tradition to Baghdad. So there is always this interaction of knowledge between this civilization and cultures. I think the problem is that also one area is that we have, for example, this study of like Hindu and Muslim relation, Islam and Christianity, Islam and Judaism. This kind of a comparative studies and dialogue has a long tradition. One of the reasons is that this has been neglected. There is no dialogue between Buddhism and Islam academically and also non-academically. This is, I think, this is the reason why there is not much of understanding of these two worlds and their connection.
One last question from me. My name is Zach. I don't think you can see any of us, but there's a few of us over here. I just have a etymology question. Sufi. Which came first, wool or mystical? You know about this? Suf as like wool, the wool wearing ones, Sufi.
Very interesting question. Unfortunately, I don't know. I don't know the answer for this. I don't know the history of like which one would come first etymologically. And also, I'm not an scholar of Arabic, so and Sufi is not a Persian word. It's an Arabic word. Um, but if you want to hear my mm, my guess, I would say is Suf as clean and pure is much closer to the Sufi tradition than the whole. There is this explanation that they were wearing the whole. I think the concept of purity is closer um, to the Sufi tradition that they have adapted it.
Thank you. I've never heard that before. I like that.
Thank you.
So I guess we're coming to the end of this talk. It's been absolutely interesting in all kinds of ways. I would like to thank you, Ershad. I hope that we are going to have more of these conversations. I think this series of three talks that we had is a good start in having this dialogue in terms of history, in terms of knowledge, in terms of geography, and so on. So thank you very much for participating, and looking forward for more.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. I appreciate it.